Hi book friends, it is that time of the month. We have our pick of the month book club discussion. So welcome back to my channel everyone, or welcome if you're new here. Pick of the month for August is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. If you don't know what pick of the month is, it is simply my one book of the previous month that isn't necessarily my highest rated book, but it is the book that I enjoyed critiquing most. So for my first pick of the month, July, was Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen, which I'll link above if you do want to go watch that. In the comment section for that video, someone suggested doing these with spoilers because that had been very much spoiler free. There is value in that because obviously I'd be able to talk about it in a bit more detail without worrying about spoiling something. So I am gonna try a spoiler version for this month. If you haven't read this and you don't want spoilers, this is your warning to maybe come back to this video once you have read it. If you don't mind seeing some spoilers and you think that might actually get you motivated to read this book, by all means please watch this video. And if you have read it, I would love to hear your thoughts on the following questions and kind of having a discussion about this book. So I think it's important before I dig into these questions to just talk a little bit more about what this book is about. If you have read it, obviously you'll know, but if you haven't, this might be useful to you. So we follow Xingyin, who is the daughter of the moon goddess Chang'e. Now Chang'e is a Asian myth where a mortal woman ascends to immortality and is also essentially imprisoned on the moon. Xingyin is her daughter, but she also has a mortal father who is a great archer, kind of fabled archer. When Xingyin finds out that her mother is in fact imprisoned, she is unfortunately also sent away. As a precaution to keep her safe, she needs to travel. We see Xingyin vow to come back and save her mother and free her from imprisonment, and that becomes Xingyin's sole purpose in this book, is to make good on that promise. And I love that, but I will come back to that in one of the later questions. We then see her land in the Celestial Empire, where she meets a young prince, Liwei, and immediately forms a connection with him. This is pretty much the first part of the story, covers their kind of childhood and her growing up in this palace. We then move on to when she is slightly older and they have this beautiful little friendship. Now the story is also told in 3 parts. Her and Prince Liwei now have a very established friendship, but they also start to feel a little bit more romantically towards each other. We see her kind of take after her father, and that she is a exceptional archer, so exceptional in fact that the sort of general or whoever it is of this army basically wants her to join because she is just so skilled at combat. Liwei is promised to a bride, which he begrudgingly accepts, but he does accept it for the good of the empire. And we see her feel almost, although she does understand it, she does feel a little bit betrayed, and she does feel like she no longer has a place by his side, and so she takes this opportunity to leave and to join the army. So she appreciates the opportunity to put some distance between herself and Prince Liwei, who is now engaged to be married, and she is very, very heartbroken by it all. But that kind of just focuses her again, takes it as an opportunity to really double down on what she was trying to achieve, which is to win this talisman that guarantees her a favour from the Celestial Emperor. And of course that favour would be to free her mother. So she doubles down on that, and she chooses these missions that are often very dangerous, specifically so that she could do something so heroic that she will win this favour. Eventually she does win it by actually saving the prince's life. The first thing of course, that she asks for is for her mother, the moon goddess, to be set free. And this is also the first time she reveals her true identity. We see the emperor being very reluctant to grant her this favor, so he kind of says, well, I need a little bit more from you. I need you to go and collect these dragon essences, I guess, and bring it back to me. So let's dig into the first question. As I just mentioned, she does join the army. She is a brilliant fighter, specifically a phenomenal archer. Her aim is very true. She is very quick on the draw as well. You just see her exhibit a lot of her like heroic father's traits, which is a nice nod to her parentage, obviously. Even though she is so skilled, I didn't feel like she ever really had a thirst for violence. I think you always see her leave that as a last resort. Like, she will only really kill something when it is necessary to the safety of her comrades, when like she feels people around her, or of course her own life, is endangered. She will kind of take those measures and put something down. There is an example where this kind of mythical being with, I think, almost like a type of hydra, and has numerous heads, and only the one head would be able to actually kill this creature. Now, this creature has been tormenting the village and killing people, taking people. So it isn't as though Xingyin is just seeking these creatures out and killing them just to gain favor. She is actually making sure that it serves a greater purpose too. If she feels that she is saving lives, she will make the kill. If she does not feel like a kill is necessary, she wouldn't do it. So I, from the beginning, didn't ever feel like Xingyin was someone who would just kill or who was particularly violent, which is an interesting contrast because obviously she is a soldier, and you would almost expect from a soldier to have that instinct to kill, which she doesn't have. And I found her such an interesting character because I think she was incredibly empathetic and sympathetic even to these creatures. There were so many instances where you could really see the turmoil of like, do I take the shot? Do I not? How long can I wait before I do kill? And especially with the creature I just mentioned, which was this 5-headed or 7-headed beast. This thing spews like this acid type venom, I guess. And even when she's injured, we see her still hesitant. And it wasn't until her comrades were injured, Wenzhi, her, I think is a or her captain, her captain and third part of this love triangle in this book, which I'll talk about in a second. It isn't until he's injured by this being that she kind of decides to take the shot. Even though she's feisty, I never once, from start to finish, felt her be bloodthirsty. She starts to get close to her captain, and they have a real kind of understanding, a real accord, and he sees her in quite a different light. And I think even though she doesn't have the same overwhelming love for this man that she has for Liwei, she does grow to love him and respect him and feel respected by him, and I think that's a really beautiful dynamic. So when she is betrayed by him, because you find out that he is actually prince of like the demon realm, she is very betrayed, but even then she doesn't feel the need to physically harm. And even when he is endangered, we have a scene where he's out cold and his brother approaches and makes it quite clear that he is willing to kill him while he's unconscious. Xingyin is just like very opposed to that. She's very opposed to killing and harming. Even though she is so heartbroken and betrayed by this man, she still chooses to protect, and she still chooses to save him and to make sure that when there is conflict between him and his brother, that he is able to fight back. So I think she's always very just in how she kind of approaches violence. Like I said, she is feisty and she is good at killing, but I don't think she ever seeks any of that out. I touched a little bit on the love triangle in this book, and I'll go into that a bit more now. As I mentioned, we meet Liwei first. We see him solely responsible for the change in Xingyin's position. So she starts out when she first enters the mortal realm, and she obviously has no clue how to go about living there. She is still very young at this point, even for an immortal, and we see her feel so uncertain and so homesick, and she takes this position as sort of like a handmaiden for a noble. Also at that point has no clue as to how she is going to free her mother, which is the one thing she's kind of set out to do. So she meets Liwei, who is hosting this tournament almost. So we have a bit of a trial aspect, even though it literally lasts for a couple of pages. But we see him instantly drawn to her, instantly come to her defense. See Liwei immediately favor her in these trials as well. There's something like a tea ceremony where she makes a mistake and she presents the most terrible cup of tea ever, and Liwei kind of just agrees that it is the best cup of tea. So he's kind of constantly coming to her defense, and we see that throughout the book. Even as they age, he's always looking out for her. He's always trying to placate his parents, especially his mother, because very early on you learn that his mother is almost solely responsible for Chang'e's imprisonment. So there is a bit of a surprise when we find out that the same woman that Xingyin saw in the Moon Palace is also Liwei's mother, who is obviously the Celestial Empress. So we see Liwei constantly having to defend Xingyin to his mother, because she is almost always out to get her in a way, and she has so much influence over her husband and obviously also over the court, that she can very easily turn everyone against Xingyin if it wasn't for Liwei. In terms of what she gets out of their relationship, is the foot in the door. She wouldn't see it as an opportunity to gain something, because that's not the kind of character she is. She doesn't use people to gain what she wants. She will kind of do it herself, if that makes sense. So with Liwei, I think she sees someone, and it's definitely first love. It's definitely like puppy love, because you kind of grow up with this person, you get to know this person. But I do think that she feels that he is most sincere around her, and I think she feels an opportunity to be vulnerable with him, even though she is throughout their relationship keeping her true identity kind of secret from him, because I think in the beginning she's really scared that he would tell his parents and she would be banished from the palace, or worse. And she also worries that her mother will be punished if she is found. So we see her really consider the pros and cons of telling people who she is, and decide that it is for the best if no one knows until the right moment. Even though she does hide that from him, I do think that she feels almost like a safe space to be really honest and vulnerable with this person. She's always felt really safe with him. She's always felt like she has a friend and she has a protector, even though she feels this overwhelming love for him, which he is a good guy, so it's not unwarranted. But I do think that a lot of how much she loves him does maybe come back to the fact that this is her first love. Because we then see her with Wenzhi have, I think more of a mutual respect. I almost feel like with Liwei, we see him protect her a lot, and he almost makes her feel, and I don't think it's his intention. I don't think he means to approach it from a perspective of she cannot defend herself and so I will defend her, because he does acknowledge very often that she is a great archer, a better archer than he can possibly be. So I don't think it's his intention maybe to make her seem like a damsel, but I think he is very quick to come to her rescue, and to want to keep her safe and keep her protected, which is lovely in itself. But I think with Wenzhi we see more of a respect and this sort of understanding between them that they don't really need that from each other. What they need from each other is more of a companionship. What he offers her is more grown up. It's more of like a adult relationship, whereas I think with Liwei it tends to still feel like a summer fling, or that kind of first very passionate love, but maybe it doesn't long term have the legs to stand on. Obviously the relationships in this will change a lot, especially considering Wenzhi's betrayal in this. But even when he does betray her, he almost pleads with her to stay with him and to come with him, because his feelings for her is genuine. I did feel sympathy for Wenzhi, not obviously in the fact that he betrayed her, but I do feel as though when he does find out that she had kept her identity a secret from him, he's very accepting of it. It doesn't make her feel judged for it, where I think Liwei does. And so to see the moment where he reveals his true identity to her and she doesn't reciprocate that feeling of non-judgment, I think is tough to see, because he obviously expected her to be as kind of forgiving and as welcoming of him and his identity as he was of her. At the end of this, we do see Liwei break off his engagement because he's choosing to be with our main character. But then we also have Xingyin's dreams kind of plagued by Wenzhi. I think there's like a real connection between those two, almost like a Darkling and Alina connection. If you know. Wenzhi's gonna need an incredible redemption arc for them to even have a chance again. Strangely, I think I am still rooting for Wenzhi. And the funny thing about this book is I hate love triangles. I did mention this in my wrap-up video, but because the sole focus for Xingyin isn't her romances, it isn't which boy she'll pick. Obviously, yes, the subplot is there, and every now and again that almost overrides her need to save her mother, but we see her kind of chastise herself for that almost and feel like, okay, I need to refocus, because the goal here is still to free my mother. It isn't about love, because her focus is so fixed on her end goal and the journey that'll get her to that goal, and the romance is kind of secondary. I didn't mind the love triangle. I actually could see, and I think this is also just going off on another tangent, but I think this is also why it works, is because both characters bring so much. Whenever we have moments with Liwei and he's really sincere and really sort of protective of her and offers her that safe space, I do root for him. And then we have scenes with Wenzhi and he's just like, he's so almost in awe of her and her skills. He's so respectful. I think he just quietly loves her, quite a fierce love as well, and I don't think it's been on display enough in this book, and I'm interested to see if his feelings become a bit louder, and also how she then responds. Long term, I almost feel as though she will maybe get a little bit bored with Liwei. I think he tries to keep her too safe. He tries to keep the space around them too small and contained, whereas Wenzhi is perfectly fine with them kind of taking on the world together. So yeah. Discussion of Liwei kind of brings us perfectly to this question, because we do have a moment when she has won this talisman and she has asked for a favor, which is obviously to free her mother. We see Liwei respond afterwards, like I said, with quite a bit of judgment. He sort of comes at her and he says, you know, you've lied to me and you've kept secret from me for so many years, which they kind of smooth over quite quickly. But I think he also feels quite betrayed almost, that she did not ask for him, because obviously she could ask for anything. We see him kind of insinuate that she should have asked for that instead of what she asked for, because that has always been a goal. Does that make her a static character? And I don't think it does. I think it makes her a goal-driven character. She wanted to go back, be able to free her mother from her imprisonment on the moon. Something I should have mentioned before. Chang'e becomes immortal because she fears for the safety of her daughter. She is told that either Xingyin or herself will die in childbirth, and she, when she goes into labor, starts feeling like that might be true. She drinks this elixir that was granted to her husband, the archer, as a reward from the emperor. When she drinks it, she becomes immortal, and because this elixir was meant for her husband, the emperor feels that she has cheated, she has kind of taken this favor for herself, and that's how she becomes imprisoned. So the whole reason she is there to begin with is because she wanted her daughter to be safe. So you can see why Xingyin's sole motivation is to repay that favor and free her mother. And I think to give that up just because there is a boy who didn't necessarily even need to accept the arranged marriage. Like, there is talk of how he might have kicked back against it, but he does it for the good of his empire, which we can understand. But that also doesn't mean that she should sacrifice something she has worked so incredibly hard for to do what he could not do. And he could have done that in a conversation with his parents, whereas if she had to do that, she had to sacrifice this very rare opportunity. She thinks that without this talisman it would be impossible to free her mother, and she is of course right. So to give that up for something that isn't impossible, that could be remedied by a conversation, of course she isn't going to do that. And I think throughout this we see her falter every now and again. We see her when she first realizes that she is in love with Liwei, and then he reciprocates that feeling. We see her lose focus a little bit and come back and kind of feel quite ashamed of the fact that she wasn't maybe working as hard towards that goal to save her mother. And also we have a moment where she is first approached to join the army, and she's very torn between what to do. She obviously thinks that joining the army would get her closer to winning the talisman, but we also see her wanting to stay because staying would mean staying close to Liwei, the boy she loves. And it is only when he announces his betrothal that she actually chooses or feels like the decision is sort of made for her. And we see her feel very ashamed for even kind of debating that in the first place. So yeah, I don't think she is a static character at all. I think she grows leaps and bounds throughout this book. We see her thinking change, react to things differently. We see her move through the world differently. We obviously also see her gain glory on these exploits, and every sort of adventure she goes on solidifies her as a hero. I just really like the fact that her sole focus was always something that was so pure. So after she kills this 5-headed mythical creature that I had mentioned previously, they come upon a cache of like jewels and rare objects, and she finds, or is, I'd say she is drawn to the bow more than her just kind of stumbling upon it and finding it that way. She is drawn by something, and she finds that this something is a bow. And it's this really cool bow that belonged to some ancient warrior. Now, I don't think, unless I just completely skimmed over that part, but I don't think it's explicitly mentioned who this warrior is. I have a feeling that somewhere along the line this bow belonged to her father. When we see the emperor instruct her to go and find these dragons and collect their essence, which is so essentially he instructs her to find the dragons and collect the pearls that they have. He doesn't actually mention to her that the pearl contains their essence, so their entire being is held in this little pearl. If she were to take these pearls to the empire or to whoever she hands them off, she's essentially handing over power to command these dragons. When she does eventually summon these dragons, we see them not at all interested in her until they notice this bow. And I think it is maybe because it is a hero's bow, and it is something that only a hero would wield, and something that kind of signals that this person is pure of heart. We often in fantasy or certain fantasy stories see this idea that like the chosen one will always be pure, and the chosen one will always have good intentions. And so I think being chosen to wield this bow also kind of gives Xingyin an element of trustworthiness. I think the dragons immediately see her as someone who can be trusted with their pearls and who will choose to do the right thing, because I feel like the chosen one kind of always does the right thing. Now, it could also be that I'm just completely making this up, but I'm pretty sure that the person who wielded the dragon pearls before they were given back to the dragons had ownership of this bow. So I think immediately in seeing this bow, the dragons may have seen almost like a companionship or a kinship. They felt that because she wields the same bow, that she would have the same heart as the person who had it before, and so they kind of trust her instinctively with essentially their lives. And it brings us to our final question. Now, I think this one's really interesting because this is the one I kind of thought about most, I think. And that is, as I mentioned, these pearls contain the dragon's essence, their will. So the possession of these pearls would be able to wield the dragons in whichever way they see fit. The dragons do make it clear that if someone used them in a war, or there was any sort of maliciousness, I guess, to the actions that they had to perform, that they would kind of wither because they'd be doing it against their will. I think they also make it quite clear that they would never pick sides, and so I think making them pick sides or pitting them against any sort of party would be going against their will and would make them wither until they eventually die. That is like maybe the number one reason why Xingyin feels she cannot hand these pearls over, because she obviously doesn't want these dragons to suffer, which kind of comes back to that empathy and sympathy again that I mentioned previously. She sees that obviously as quite a violent act to force these dragons to do something that they are so set against that they would literally die if they did it, but which is very dramatic. But that initially is why she doesn't want to hand these pearls over. She very much wants to hang on to them. And then again we see her have this internal battle where she knows that in order to win her mother's freedom, she has to hand over these pearls, but she cannot in good conscience do it if it still contains the essence. And so her kind of very quick thinking would be to free the dragon's essence from the pearls, so she can literally hand over these little empty vessels to the emperor. That way she fulfills her task, but she also doesn't harm the dragons, and she makes sure that they're free and they can kind of go off and do whatever they want to do. And also we see her throughout this book not be a fan of the empire. We see her tolerate it more than anything else, and we see her have a real, I wouldn't say hatred, but a real dislike of the Celestial Empress, but also almost by proxy the emperor too. I think she never does anything that will serve the empire's goal, and I think she can very quickly recognize that what he is trying to do would be a selfish goal, that he would take these dragons, he would manipulate them to his will and to do his bidding, and that would A, not be good for the dragons because they would die, and B, would also probably start like some conflict on like a grand scale, which she doesn't want to see. I think if she made a selfish decision to hand over these pearls to the Celestial Emperor, we would have seen for sure war break out, but we also would have seen her not be able to live peacefully with herself. I think she feels, even though I think at the end of this book she does still feel very like betrayed, she is still reeling from what happened with Wenzhi, but we see her happy to have freed her mother and to have done so like on her own terms. And I think if she had handed over the pearls, she would have still been able to free her mother, but I think her heart wouldn't have been happy with it. She would have struggled with the consequences and would have definitely felt a lot of guilt and shame, especially because the dragons kind of entrusted her with their lives or souls essentially. That kind of concludes our pick of the month book club discussion. I hope that, I guess this would have been insightful for some people. I'm hoping that it kind of opens up a bit of a discussion. Like, if you agree with me, please let me know. If you disagree with me, please comment as well and let me know how you feel differently about this book. If you haven't read it but you've still watched this video, let me know if this discussion has kind of enticed you, if you would now go off and pick this up and read it for yourself. But yeah, this has been Pick of the Month. Like I said, enjoy these videos immensely because I get to dig into these books a little bit more and maybe think about things that I wouldn't ordinarily have thought of. Thank you so much if you stuck with me. Please consider, as usual, subscribing. It would mean a lot to me. See you next time. Until then, happy reading.